Now it goes towards Kerr. No! Over the top of Hurd.
Charlie Cameron, did he get a toe on that? It would be a miracle goal from Charlie. It's Connor Rosey, mesmerised them all, and kicked one of the goals of the year.
And the siren sounds in a heavyweight stoush, an epic, a classic.
Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to Access All Areas thanks to Crypto.com. Spring is here and we are just days away from the final series kicking off, and today we're going to take a closer look at each game. Plus, with the trade period fast approaching, Damo is going to give us an update on the leading names being talked about as I welcome in Damian Barrett and Matthew Lloyd. Welcome.
Thanks, Nat. Welcome.
Finals are here, so exciting. Let's get straight into it. Thursday night, a qualifying final, Collingwood and Melbourne. Lloydie, how do the Pies win with this one?
How they win it, Nat, is speed, speed, speed. That's what they must have against Melbourne, because Melbourne are the best defensive side in the competition. And if you let Lever and May and these types get set behind the ball, you can't score. And so Collingwood just have to go aggressive, as they always do in their game. They couldn't quite get this to happen on King's birthday, where they were stifled and they set up so well behind the ball with Gawn, Lever and May, and they couldn't score enough. Melbourne went on and won that game of footy. They got it going late, but it was too late. So I just think the names we've got, De Goey, Crisp, Dacos won't play, obviously, but Josh Dacos will be there. Noble, Quaynor, Maynard, they just have to go and try and turn these defenders inside out to give them the best chance of scoring.
So, Damo, if the Pies falter this final series, what is the big story that we're all going to be talking about?
So you're giving me the doom scenarios out of this today.
Doomsday, that's
no,
what your
look,
job.
there's too much at stake now to not win. And I don't mean to say that lightly, Nat. The dominance they've had in the home and away season, 18 wins this year, 16 wins last year when they got it right halfway through. And obviously the finals being lost last year by a kick on both occasions. The 6-point loss to the Geelong team in the qualifying final, the 1-point loss in the prelim final. They just have to go all the way through this year. There's too much going right for it not to be capitalised on.
All right, let's look at the Ds now, and Lloydie, how do they topple the Pies?
Well, to me, they're the toughest side in the competition. They're brutally tough, and I think that's why they're there, and that's why they're in such great form heading into the final series. And I just wonder, have they got too much depth for Collingwood through the midfield without Nick Dacos? So, you know, I'd love to run out with Jack Viney in a final. I'd love to run out with Petrarca, Oliver. Max Gawn, to me, is the best ruckman in the comp, but he wasn't All-Australian because they didn't get him into the ruck on his own till 7 or 8 weeks ago. So I think that the brutality of their side and their pressure and their midfield is why they can potentially beat Collingwood in this game.
It's going to be such an intriguing contest. Cannot wait for it. But if the the Ds falter again in the final series, what's the narrative going to be for them?
We'll be asking the question, do they just get hot in the latter stages of 2021 and obviously breeze through that year's final series? They didn't deal with the expectation last year. They started well, fell away, held on, but ultimately weren't near winning a premiership. And then this year they've ground out a really good home and away season when things got a little bit dicey halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. That will be the question, though. Were they just lucky in a COVID year to get hot back end of year? If they don't capitalise, to Lloydie's point, on the greats, not just Melbourne greats, but the all-time greats of Gawn, Petrarca and Oliver.
So now, Damo, I want a Pies player who you think is going to step up in September, but I don't want the obvious. So I don't want a Dacos, some more, a De Goey or a Pendlebury. So who are you going with?
Will you give me a Bros Maynard?
Yeah, why not?
Allow me that,
he's not a top five.
He's one of my favourites, Nat, and he's one of every Collingwood supporter's favourite as well. I mean, it's for this sort of stuff that he brings, the relentless tackling, the refusal to give up, the protection of the teammates, the constant looking for a skirmish, the trying the impossible when he couldn't get Pickett there, but went back and got him again with some help. So he never gives up. I love that about him, and that's what the Pies fans love too.
All right, and not so obvious Ds for you.
You might find this is obvious, maybe, so I'll see what you're the judge. But
Okay,
Jake Lever.
I'll allow it.
Oh, you'll allow it, yeah. So I think that for me, if you can shut down Myercheck and you can shut down Jamie Elliott, where do they get their goals from? So they often get a lot of inside 50s, Collingwood, but they can't generate enough scores for what they do. And this man is like the brick wall. He reads it so well. So Stephen May's the type to take a Myercheck. Somebody else could take a Jamie Elliott and he'll just sit in front of them all day long. So they have to, if he gets his game going, they're hard to stop.
This game is a toss of a coin, but I need a tip.
Melbourne.
Collingwood.
Collingwood for mine as well. All right, to Friday night's elimination final, Carlton and the Sydney Swans. And Lloydie, Carlton have been the in-form team at the moment, despite losing that last home and away game to the Giants. How do they get the job done against the Swans?
Depth through the midfield and bully them, beat them up. I think that's when they played their best. So think of Michael Voss as a player. That is when Carlton are at their best as a team. And I thought they weren't that against the Giants last week. They've been that in most games, whether it was Chera and Walsh just coming back into the team. But when they're in this mood, they dismantled Collingwood. And we're going to watch a clip here where Nick Dacos didn't actually want to go for the footy. You know, this is it here. He jumped out of the way there because of the brutality of Carlton through that midfield. And I think they have a deeper midfield than the Sydney Swans, and that's where it'll be won and lost.
So, Damo, from your perspective, if the Blues get knocked out in that first final, apart from Blues fans inundating talkback radio for the next week, what is the storyline?
Just that they left themselves with way too much work to do after round 13 when they had just 4 wins to their name and a draw. So the 6 losses in a row that had come before that period, the 8 losses out of the 9-game sequence they endured, it just left them with too much work to do. They're entering the finals, obviously, from 5th spot, not a double chance, which their best form is clearly worthy of. So that'll be the narrative. They'll go away happy that they've managed to retrieve their season in season, but it will be considered a major opportunity loss given that how high-end their best is.
Lloydie, what about last year's grand finalists in the Swans? At least they've got some finals experience in that group. Yeah,
I think they play the MCG really well as well. So for them to win, I think they have to take on Carlton in an outside sort of game. Aggressive ball movement. I think Carlton's defence can be really questioned at times where they can look all at sea. They were terrible last week against the Giants. The first quarter against the Gold Coast Suns the week before, they were off. So I think the Swans have to challenge them in that area. Goulden running off their legs, Blakey, these types can really challenge.
Where are they most vulnerable down back when you highlight it like that?
I think it's more a team defence. Right. Their team defensive structure gets broken down and they can be off if their midfield isn't on top with their clearance work.
Damo, looking at the story of the Sydney Swans, so disappointing that, given that they were the grand finalists, they struggled to make the top 8. What's the narrative going to be if they lose?
Like Carlton, they've fought their way through in season. I think it's admirable in itself, but that will then be reflected upon. We just left ourselves too much work to do, and they've got holes everywhere in the back line. They're going to try and rectify that in the off-season. And look, Rampy's still playing well, McCartan's playing well as well, but they're not at their best, Rampy particularly, and that will be the problem for them. And I think they'll expose that themselves as the area they need to really focus on.
Lloydie, I want a Carlton player that you think is going to step up outside of a Charlie Curnow type. So who you got?
Tom De Koning. I think that why I'm selecting him is he can expose the ageing legs of Hickey. So I'm really worried about Hickey in the ruck. They've had issues in the ruck for a long time. Sydney, they've tried Sinclair, they've tried Hickey, but they haven't quite ever been able to get an A-grade ruckman, and that can hurt you in finals. So this kid's just coming into his 50th, 60th game. He's at the peak of his powers, or he's about to get there, and I think he should go into this game going, I can be the best man on the ground and help my midfield get on top through his running capacity over Hickey.
A Swan for you, Damo? Who's going to stand tall?
Yeah, 3rd season player in Logan McDonald, Nat, and he's better off, weirdly enough, without Buddy Franklin in the team. There's the first piece of vision with Buddy in shot. But look, he's kicked 30 goals from the 19 games he's played this year, and some may feel he hasn't yet quite lived up to the high draft pick that he was, but we know that the key position players take longer than that. I think he's tracking pretty well, and I reckon the final series might actually bring out the absolute best in him quite quickly, and he could become the big Swan that they
he's a huge talent, isn't he? I think he's got a big future ahead. I want a tip from both of you. Lloydie, Blues or Swans?
The Blues.
Yeah, Blues on the roll. Yep.
Blues for mine as well. All right, to the qualifying final between Brisbane and Port Adelaide at the Gabba. How do the Lions shut off the power, Lloydie?
I think the forward line is as good as there is in the competition from Brisbane. And I worry about the defence of Port Adelaide. Okay. So if there's enough ball going in there, good luck trying to stop that. Danaher and Hipwood, and then Charlie Cameron, Bailey, Rayner, and Lincoln McCarthy, if he's fit. So I think good luck trying to stop that. So that's my concern for Port Adelaide if enough ball goes in there at the Gabba.
From a Lions perspective, in terms of the storyline, Tamo, is it pretty much make a grand final or bust given how close they've gotten?
It is. You can't keep making top fours. They've either finished top four or got to the top four through the finals in each of the past 4 seasons. They don't get a better opportunity than the one they've got this year, finishing second, Gabba final, Gabba passage through to a grand final. To Lloyd's point, the forward line is humming. I thought Joe Danaher was unlucky not to be a centre-half forward in the All-Australian team, and it's not ever going to get better for the Lions under Chris Fagan than it is right now. So that will be the narrative, the wasted opportunity if they don't.
Lloydie, let's focus on Port Adelaide. Going to the Gabba Fortress is never going to be easy, but how do they cause an upset?
Well, Nat, in round 1 we saw what a side they'd be when they obliterated Brisbane through the midfield. And it's through speed and power. So it's these 3 players. They're their best players, Rosie, Butters and Horne-Francis. And while Brisbane have a good midfield and a tough midfield, they don't have the explosive power of what the Port Adelaide midfield has. And we wanted to show this game because the Giants have been red hot. But in this game 2 weeks ago at the Adelaide Oval, they were smashed by Port Adelaide through the midfield. So once they get going with this dynamic power, they are as good as any midfield in the game, and that's where they can exploit Brisbane for leg speed through the midfield.
Damo, just looking at the storylines around Port Adelaide, so much pressure on their coach Ken Hinkley throughout the season. What's the narrative going to be should they bomb out?
I'll be looking at them arguably sympathetically, Nat, because they've done it to me, in my eyes, without a really good key back to back up Aliir. And we know that Mackenzie's injured as going into the final stage of the home season. Jonas is back, but there's a hole there, and I think they've done really well to cover that hole. Equally, there's a massive hole in the ruck, and I think the midfield smaller players have covered that as well. So I'm not going to be too critical if they bow out without reaching a grand final, but they're not thinking that way, and they've reached top 4 for a reason. So, but that's the way I'll look at it if they do fall short.
Sticking with you, Damo, I want a lion outside of the obvious. So no Lachie Neale, no Joe, no Charlie, no Andrews. Who is it? Well,
it's one that you wouldn't have allowed me a couple of years ago when he was still captain, but you're going to allow me Dane Zorko in this conversation now because he's at the tail end of his career, but I feel he's still as important as ever. He's changed his role. He's pitch hitting in certain points. I think he's really effective in that hard man role up forward, Lordo. He's not going to hit the scoreboard that hard, but he's going to hit opponents hard. He's going to hit them verbally as well, and it's all part of it. And I still feel he's as valid a contributor to that club, even at this late stage of his career.
He's still got the ping in his legs at 35 years of age. I think he's looking good at the moment.
Loves a little lip and a niggle too, which I think is really vital to the Lions side as well. What about Port Adelaide? Who are you picking?
Willem Drew for me because Lachie Neale must be stopped, and if you stop Lachie Neale, you're halfway home.
I like this from you.
So, I think after your man, Finn McGuinness, I reckon he's just about the second best in it. And he goes under the radar for what a job he does for this side. Like, you can't have 4 blokes in the midfield like Rosie, Butters and Horne-Francis. You need somebody
So
like
you're locking him in for that Neale role?
Yeah, I'm locking him in, And if you can do the job and get under the skin of Lachie Neale, which you can do with a hard tag, that'll take them a long way.
The tag is alive and well. I love it. Lions or Port? Damo, what's your tip?
I've loved the Port story, but I'm taking the soft option in the selection here, Nat, Brisbane.
Doesn't want to take a risk.
I think they're the easiest.
I normally do.
I might regret this, but I think they're the biggest certainty around Brisbane.
I know, they're my dead cert too. The Lions for me. All right, in the last game we're taking a look at another elimination final between St Kilda and GWS. How did the Saints win this one at the G?
I think for me, it's that the midfield have to stand up. Must dominate the engine room. They don't bat that deep, and we had Ross Lyon on Footy Classified, and I think it's a worry for him too. You've got Brad Crouch, and then you've got Ross who hurt himself. Windhager they're trying out. Jack Steele isn't in the best form. So these guys have to, for me, have the night of their lives to beat the GWS Giants in this final.
So if they don't have the night of their lives, Damo, and they lose in that elimination final, how are we going to reflect back on St Kilda?
We'll reflect by looking forward and getting Gubby Allen and Stephen Silvani just to go to work on adding some class to a mix that has done extraordinarily well and is one of the great storylines of the year, just making it. They're not thinking it's going to end in an elimination final, but if it does, Nat, I don't think there's going to be too many critics of how they got there and what they did to get there.
Lloydie, what did the Giants do apart from just giving the ball to Toby Green?
The connection between their defence and offence is as good as any team in the competition, and it's why they beat Carlton in such convincing fashion. So they're just miserly. Apart from that Port Adelaide game a couple of weeks ago, they just don't allow you to score. They get huge numbers back, and then they just go like Richmond used to when Adam Kingsley was there, and he's learnt from Damien Hardwick. So numbers back like you can see in this picture, and then they just go and they run and they run you off their legs. So they've put in the work. Their skill level is high, and that is where I think they'll really challenge St Kilda for depth in this area.
And they can play anywhere, anytime as well, because their record on the road is magnificent in 2023. So, Damo, if the Orange Tsunami falls flat and they lose, what's the story going to be around them?
There won't be great negativity, Nat. I mean, they still feel they can win it. And weirdly enough, they felt they could win the whole thing, even when they were going badly in the middle of the year. They had this inner belief. So that's going to transport into next year regardless. It's also, too, I feel, Nat, proof that a change of coach can create wonder and excitement at a footy club. And I think there's a conservative outlook at too many clubs that change is scary. I think GWS has proven that change is exciting. And that's going to put them in good stead, not just for this year, but beyond, regardless.
You brought plenty of positivity this Monday morning.
Are
you feeling okay?
Well, you gave me the negative brief, Nat, which I think people will think I'm suited to, but I've tried to look upwards and outwards.
I like it. Lloydie, throw me a sainter who you think's going to step up outside of the obvious.
Brad Crouch is a guy I touched on just before, and he just has to. I think that their midfield, Steve Coniglio, Josh Kelly, the list goes on, Tom Green. It's a powerful midfield. So I've loved what he's given St Kilda this year. He wasn't fantastic when he first got to the club, but he's kicking a few goals. He's bursting out of stoppage really well. And he just has to have a brilliant game, in my opinion, if there'd be any chance to match the Giants midfield.
A Giants player for you, Damo?
Going with Brent Daniels, really like what he's done in this surge of the Giants. He's an old school footy smarts type player, isn't he, Lordo? And he can get the ball, certainly. He takes off the risky option. He will take the risky kick. He's tough. I know they love him. He's good in front of goal. He's creative around goal. He dishes it off. He's not that hungry like some forwards can be in that zone and that genre. So, no, a really big key player without having the status.
Forwards aren't hungry, are they?
How many goal assists did you have?
Not many.
No.
This game is super hard to tip from where I'm sitting. Saints or Giants?
The Giants.
Giants without confidence.
Yeah. If Sam Taylor plays, I think the Giants. All right, time now to play one of my favourite games here on Access All Areas. It's stay or go. And Damo, I want you to tell us whether these players are going to stay at their clubs or go during the trade period. Let's start with D's ruck in Brodie Grundy.
No, he's gone, and it will be to either Port Adelaide or Sydney. Port Adelaide leading the way there. I expect him to be a power player next year.
Bailey Smith, do you believe that he'll be staying?
I believe he'll be staying. I believe the conversations still be had away from the headlines, and Collingwood is as interested as Hawthorn, as interested as Geelong on it. But look, the party line, the public line, he will stay, and that's what I believe to be the case.
Liam Henry has told the Dockers he wants out. Where's he heading?
We're going to find out after the event, Nat. This has already been done and dusted by now. I think Hawthorn, they've certainly made some front running on him. Western Bulldogs might be a watch this space if he hasn't yet dotted the I's and crossed the T's on a deal.
Some people get tired of this, hearing about, will Dustin Martin stay or go?
Leaning towards staying this week, Lotto, but next week we could have a different answer. Okay. Look, the money attached to the deal, it's a semi-back-ended deal, and the Gold Coast Suns don't have that scope. It will only be the Suns with Hardwick or stay at Richmond, and he's comfortable with the people at Richmond.
Jade Gresham?
Had the chance to refute this himself publicly this week, chose not to, which makes you think when you get about to play a final that it's game on, and Carlton had him on the hook during the season. There may well be a nudge-nudge, wink-wink arrangement that we find out about has been sealed the deal. I still watch this space on him because he hasn't made his mind up totally, but Carlton.
Okay. Taron Thomas finished the season extremely well,
North will want a lot for him if they explore the opportunity. Again, similar to Bailey Smith, the holding pattern and the public pattern and position is he's a contracted player. Keep hearing that until the close of play, but he's exploring his own options. It's just if North can get the right deal, and they will probably want more for him than clubs will be prepared to offer. So stay is the answer there.
I've got 3 Blues for you. Paddy Dow, Zach Fisher and Jack Silvani.
Of the trio, Fisher is the one I feel is the one most likely to move at this stage. I think Silvani will eventually just realise he's a Carlton person deep down.
I don't think it would be too weird if he would.
It'd be strange,
Ben Mackay, Damo?
Gone as much as you can tell, Lordo, and one of Essendon or Port Adelaide, and whether Port Adelaide can get Grundy first and then go for the backman as well, but one of those two clubs is favoured.
Sava Radicale didn't finish the season well, but you think he'd be on the move?
He's on the move. It's just a matter of where. Hawthorn's showing some interest. Port Adelaide again. How they work it out with Grundy, Mackay and Radicale, one of those 3 will go, and possibly 2.
Your Hawks are taking everyone that in this off-season.
I know. What is going on
to last
here?
year, Nat, you're getting rid of all your players. Now you want to bring them in. Yeah.
Hey, I'm just leaving it to Sam Mitchell and the team there. They're doing a fine job. Thank you, Damo. We'll put you under the pump. That was very, very good. Now, before we go, the AFLW season is in full flight after a magnificent opening round. And a reminder to get involved with the AFLW official tipping competition thanks to Crypto.com. Just make sure you head to AFLWtipping.afl to register and put your tips in. And that is all we have time for today. Enjoy the finals. We'll be back on Monday to unpack it all. In the meantime, have a great week.